Can you see my screen okay?
We can, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let's see. I'm having a little bit of a memory lapse here on how to play for, there we go. There we go. Oh, okay. Thanks for your patience there while I got that up. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of some background on the work that we've been doing and dry farming itself, and talk about some resources and opportunities. And I'd love to leave some time at the end just for any ideas or comments that come up. And as you all know, Nate was just speaking about dry farming, and he and Dira have been dry farming at Sumbo for a while. Eliza has also been dry farming for a while. So yeah, there's another board member on DFI's board that's a part of the Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District, Kathy McQueenie. So just nice to have all these synergies here. There we go. Okay, so when we talk about dry farming, a lot of people have different ideas about what it is, and I just have a few different definitions that get tossed around here and used in different ways. So rain-fed agriculture, we're talking about relying solely on precipitation for water needs, so not irrigation. Dry farming, when we're talking about dry farming, we're referring to unirrigated crop production during a dry season. So usually in a region that receives 20 inches of rainfall or more. And in our region here in Western Oregon, the Willamette Valley, we get double that, and sometimes more if you're closer to the foothills. So we have a lot of winter precipitation, as you can see in this graph down here below. It's a little climograph of our local climate. So our warm season coincides with our least amount of rainfall, very little to no irrigation typically in those summer months when we're growing a lot of our summer crops. Another term that you'll hear kind of tossed around is dry land farming. And some people use it interchangeably. I'm not here to tell you how to use any of these terms. I'm just going to try to give you the lay of the land here. So we are talking about, we're all on the same page, so to speak. So a lot of people refer to, or a lot of definitions out there of dry land farming are referring to crop production in a region that receives less than 20 inches of rainfall without irrigation. So sometimes a fallow period to recharge soil moisture is required in Eastern Oregon to do an unirrigated dry land crop. And so when we talk more generally, just kind of zooming out a bit, it's really a place-based approach to growing crops within the constraints of your environment. And what practices, there's no one size fits all approach. We'll talk a little bit more about practices here in a moment. But we're really conserving and using soil moisture, or moisture that's stored in the soil from the rainy season during the dry season. And we're growing certain crops and certain varieties of certain crops when we're dry farming. So I hope that, yeah, if any confusion comes up about those terms, I'm happy to discuss. But yeah, people use them interchangeably, and it gets kind of confusing talking about dry farmed garlic and things like that. So nobody's wrong. It's just be aware that there's different terminology. So the basic principles of dry farming really starts with site suitability, or identifying a location that's going to work well. And there's been a lot of studies. Actually, Teresa Madison, I saw you on here. One of the first times I got to work with Teresa when I was with OSU Extension, I was introduced to Andy Gallagher, a soil scientist who was using a soil auger to pull 5-foot soil cores. So learned a lot about site suitability alongside Andy, and assessing sites below that 1-foot depth down into the 5-foot realm, and understanding where the seasonal water table sits and so forth. And yeah, soil water holding capacity. There's a lot of different factors or restrictive features. So suitable location, a really sandy or rocky site, or a site with a shallow soil, maybe it's only a couple feet deep and then there's bedrock. There's some real challenges on certain sites that may not be suitable for dry farming, but might be suitable for other practices to reduce water use. We've learned a lot in our variety trials with Nate and Eliza and other farmers that some varieties are just way more productive in this system than others. So there's been ongoing variety trials at OSU, and they're continuing to do those with farmers that participate. And getting started early. So early soil prep and planting before the drying of the topsoil, and doing a variety of different approaches to conserving soil moisture. So a lot of farmers are experimenting with different low and no-till approaches, different kinds of mulches, different plant densities, depending on the soil type. And we're doing a variety of things to facilitate deep rooting. And when we're dry farming, if we're not trickling water at the surface, we're really encouraging those roots to go much deeper. And when we have these hot days like we've been having, the deep-rooted plants really seem more resilient than some of the irrigated plants that we're looking at adjacent to our field that are being irrigated at least once a week. So you can really see that resilience in these extremes that we're experiencing. And we're doing what we can to reduce competition for water and providing microclimates. There's some sites that are dry farming that are really exposed or windy, and compared to a site that has some wind breaks in place, it's really good to have some protection, or like less exposure to windy sites, for example. So promoting microclimates with lower evaporative potential is another important practice. And zooming out a bit even more, dry farming is not a new concept. It's been practiced for millennia globally. When I was first kind of learning about dry farming, I was looking at examples on different continents, and in Europe and the Mediterranean, and in Africa and Asia, and in North America, like down in the Southwest. I think we draw a lot of inspiration from how people are approaching this in much more arid climates than what we have here. The Hopi down in Arizona is one example. And we had Dr. Michael Katutwa Johnson at one of our dry farming collaborative winter meetings about 3 years ago, I think. And this is something he said that really stood out, and I think is inspired a lot of our work with variety selection and understanding what varieties do well. But Hopi is one of the few places I know where corn is raised to fit the environment and the environment not manipulated to fit the corn. And so you can see in the picture there in the background, that field looks a lot different than the cornfields we see here. So yeah, so there's you can see the link there, and I'll share these slides with you all. And all these links, or you could, if you wanted to refer to any of these presentations that I'm sharing or mentioning, they're all on the Dry Farming Collaborative YouTube channel. So the Dry Farming Institute, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to empower growers to thrive with less water. And we are primarily working to support growers' exploration of dry farming and other water resilient practices through collaborative projects, outreach, and education. So we do a lot of listening and building relationships to understand, which direction we want to head. And the lower bottom picture here, you can recognize Eliza there. There's actually a few members of our board that aren't pictured here. We actually need an updated photo, so we've since expanded a bit. And so we just were able to hire our first staff last year. So we were a working board until last year of June 2023. So I resigned from the board and became a director. And then Ashley Rude. You can barely see her in the picture she provided for our website. I think she likes being tiny. She's from Arizona, so she's pictured there, I think in the Grand Canyon. But we're both co-directors, so we're establishing more of in place of a traditional ED. Both of us are co-directing and looking to establish the organization in a more flat structure. Oh. So this is a little timeline just to give you a sense of like how the work has evolved that we've done in Western Oregon. Excuse me, I have these little earbuds that are sort of new to me and I'm trying to figure out how to use them. So in 2013, when I was working with OSU Extension, we were doing some case studies on dry farming and then didn't do our first demonstration until 2015. So that was a drought year. Some of you might remember that year. It was a pretty extreme drought. A lot of people showed up to a field day we had, and that's where like the first we started the Dry Farming Collaborative evolved. So a lot of people that attended that field day in August of 2015 had experienced their irrigation restricted early or had their well run dry and were looking at alternatives. So we really came together and created space for knowledge sharing because there were some more experienced people that had been dry farming for decades, for example, and then some very new people who were new to the concept. So it started off as a platform for knowledge exchange, which was originally some meetings at the Grange, email list, Facebook group. And then from there was a lot of questions that started evolving that we didn't have great answers or resources for, especially through extension. So we started to develop research projects, and some of the two main questions we were addressing early on were, is my site suitable for dry farming, and what crops or varieties do well dry farmed? So we designed some studies together and invited farmers to participate. And so you can see that was all starting back in 2016, and then the nonprofit organization, the Dry Farming Institute, got established in 2019. And the reason being, it was primarily the educators, researchers, and farmers that were involved in this community of practice, the Dry Farming Collaborative. But a lot of that work was primarily happening within counties, as extension appointments are. And there was people in Washington and Northern California and other parts that we wanted to collaborate with. So we were kind of expanding our geographical scope, and that's where the Dry Farming Institute came in. So you might hear about the OSU Dry Farming Program, the Dry Farming Collaborative, and the Dry Farming Institute. And I hope this helps to clarify. There are three different entities, all of which are kind of overlapping and collaborate together. So the OSU is doing most of the research. The collaborative is the community of practice. It would exist whether the OSU Dry Farming Project existed, or if the Dry Farming Institute dissolved, the collaborative would still exist. So I hope that helps clarify a bit, because a lot of people get confused. Here's just a few snapshots of some commonly dry farmed crops. Tomatoes, potatoes, melon, squash, beans, various grains. There's a few established dry farm orchards, and I know that Nate has a dry farmed orchard there at Sembo Produce as well. And grapes, I think, are more commonly known dry farm crop. A lot of winemakers know the quality of the wine is improved with dry farm grapes. And there's actually even a group of winemakers that only use dry farm grapes in Oregon called the Deep Roots Coalition. And they do tasting events sometimes. So you can keep a lookout for that. And you all may already be aware of this, but the reason different growers are interested in dry farming, there's a variety of entry points. But conservation, obviously, you all are on the board of the SWCD, but conservation of water but also energy and time for the farmer. When you're not irrigating, there's less weeds to manage. And then some dry farmers you'll hear they might have water access for irrigation on part of where they're farming, but in order to expand on this other part, they have, their only option is to dry farm, whether because it's expense or just there's not water rights available. And another reason is storability. Alex Stone, she did some work with Jenny Wetzel and studied winter squash, both irrigated and dry farmed, and put them in storage. And a lot of squash that typically rots by November or December will store many months longer. So while the yield is oftentimes lower with dry farm crops, there are these benefits sometimes like storability and then flavor. A lot of people, when we do tasting side by side of irrigated and dry farm produce, customers or the general public will be really excited by the flavor, the color, the texture of the dry farm produce. And some people are also really just thinking about the future, like while they might be able to irrigate, they're not sure that their kids will be able to irrigate where they're farming, for example. So just a brief snapshot here, the basics again, highlighting soil, water holding capacity, early soil prep, the importance of crop or cultivar selection, and then planting density. Like planting density is going to vary. What works best on a site is going to vary from site to site based on water holding capacity and the crop being grown. So people are doing a variety of different cultivation methods, but mulching or surface protection or shallow cultivation to minimize the competition for that moisture stored in the soil. And then soil health, really, it's whether that's all the things that improve soil health are going to increase water holding capacity, less soil disturbance, organic matter, cover cropping, etc. So just visually, I'm a visual learner. So these are just a snapshot of what dry farming is not. Left is a photo of a river trip I took, and you'll see a lot of these little irrigation lines or pumps in the river, kind of siphoning water out. And then the picture to the right is a field adjacent to me where on hot days, this thing is just pumping water into the air. So that's not dry farming. And then I'm just going to give you a few picture slides of what dry farming looks like at a few different sites. This is a few years ago. This was taken, I believe, in early August. This is off of Peoria Road, so just over the river. And then I share this picture here just because plants are teachers too, the volunteers that show up in your plot. And I'm inspired by a couple of volunteers that some people might call weeds, purslane and common speedwell. Like when the plants are already fruiting, and you'll see purslane and Veronica persica or common speedwell, just kind of providing a nice little cover for the soil there. This is a picture from last year, and this is about this time actually last year at the mid-July. And we are starting to get some Armenian cucumbers and silver slicers and a cucumber trial there off of 53rd Street in Benton County near the Marys River. And we've noticed that in doing some cucumber trials that these Armenian types don't get bitter. They continue to produce throughout the summer, and I'm trialing quite a few more this year. So they're actually in the melon family. They're cucumber melons. And this picture is from the two on the left are from this morning. The plot off of Peoria Road, and you can see some tomatoes and some sunflowers and corn. That's the purslane I'm letting kind of provide cover here next to the zucchini and squash. But this is a new variety that we're growing because we're just have these ongoing variety trials. But there's somebody who specializes in cucumber melons, and the first one to fruit this year is Carosello Leccese, a striped variety from the cucumber shop. So that's pretty exciting. And another pretty exciting thing is like the chickpeas are already starting to produce. So we're going to be harvesting some of these green pods for someone to pickle for a tasting event soon. So let's see. This is just one more picture here before I go into some resources that we have available. So different tasting events. The bottom left there is a gathering at Eliza's farm where we are making these ristras of these Italian storage tomatoes that are commonly dry farmed in the Campania region of Italy. So we trialed a bunch of those there here in Corvallis and arrived with a selection of 3 that we really like, that were really productive, store well, taste good. So we feature them at different events and share the fruit so people can save seeds. So that's just another example of some of the different events and outreach that we do to raise awareness about some of these varieties that do well and get people excited about them. So our current work really is we're focused on we kind of have 3 main buckets. So we're doing some collaborative projects around pathways to water resilient farming. And that includes dry farming, but expands beyond that a bit. And I'll share just a small example of one project we're working on in that realm. And then we're also working on improving accessibility of research and resources on dry farming. I mentioned OSU is doing a lot of the research, but some of it's hard to access and find. So we are taking some different approaches to just making these resources more accessible and available. And then another bucket of work that we've identified that we're helping with is this collaborative market development from seed to table. So for dry farm products. And I'll share just a little bit about that in a moment. So the collaborative projects, one of our current projects that we're working on is the Western Water Resilience Collaborative. So the 2 parts that we're helping with, so this grant is from NEFA, and the lead organization is American Farmland Trust. But we have Ashley Rude, the co-director that I work with at DFI, is going to be leading some online trainings for ag service providers. And then the part that I'm helping with is these on-farm demonstrations. So we're partnering with farmers, schools, nonprofits, tribes to host demonstrations featuring water resilient practices in different contexts. Really just with the logic that, since there is no one size fits all approach, having partners and highlighting case studies in different contexts, what strategies work based on the soil, the microclimate, the farmers themselves, the values, et cetera. We want to uplift and amplify some of those stories because we can't do it all from one place. So you can see on the map there the spread of our partners for this project, and I'll show you in a moment some of the field tours that are coming up that you might be interested in. Another example of how we're improving accessibility to research and resources is the Dry Farm Mapping Project. There was a grad student that worked with Lucas Niebert to take what we had learned about site suitability from that research and then create a map that kind of highlights, based on these different characteristics, which parts of Oregon are suitable for dry farming. And it's not, it's to be taken with a grain of salt because some actual place-based assessment would be important too. But to get a general, broad lay of the land, this was a project that had no place to live. So we made it accessible on our website. And if you're interested, you can use your phone to pull up that QR code, and you could do that later when I share these slides too. Another thing that, another resource that we created is the Dry Farming Seed Directory. So we have the beginnings of a seed directory here. There's a lot to be added still, but a lot of the varieties that had done well in variety trials were kind of tucked away in PDFs on the back end of the website and so forth. So we have a searchable directory that highlights which varieties have stood out in our variety trials with farmers all across Western Oregon. you can see some of those here, but you can pull it up on our website too, to get I think there's maybe about 20 varieties listed so far. Something I helped to start that lives on the Oregon State University Dry Farming Program's website. This is a great place for if you interacting with any landowners or farmers that are on that are just new to dry farming and want to get started and get some resources. This is like a great, I think, entry point. So there's 3 modules. It's all free. It's online. It's accessible. And there's interviews with 5 farmers that kind of take you through the curriculum to share their experience. This is the Dry Farming Collaborative I mentioned. So this is the community of practice, and there's a list to join the email list, or a link here to join the email list if you'd like. And then there's also kind of archived presentations, most of which were created in the pandemic when we all were doing that. And then there's still the Facebook group that exists where a lot of ideas and questions are shared and asked. Just a snapshot here of some of the different marketing materials that have been created. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because I realize we don't have much more time, and I want to leave a little space at the end. Our website has all these upcoming events listed and more. They're not even all on the slide. There's quite a few events starting at the end of July, going through really the end of this year, that you're welcome. Dryfarming.org/events is a good way to learn more about what all those are entailing. And I just, after sharing all this, I hope that this is the beginning. There's just sharing a little bit about who we are and what we do. I'd love to hear any ideas as they come up now or in the future about opportunities or things that you see as far as ways that we could collaborate in the future. And with that, I'm going to end. If you want to sign up for our e-newsletter, there's a QR code there up in the upper left, and you could just add your email, and we're going to be sending out an email pretty soon in the next couple weeks, I think, for highlighting all these different events and some new resources that are available. So thank you so much. I'd love to leave some time for any comments, questions, or ideas that might have come up.
Yeah, please feel free, everybody. We've got some time here that we've slotted, and then our agenda is not all that packed. So this is the opportunity if you have some questions or some ideas that you want to share, or just musings about how we might be able to link up with the efforts of the Dry Farming Institute. I'd appreciate you contributing.
So I have a question.
Go ahead, Carrie.
This is Kerry. I was intrigued by the photograph of, I think it was melons, and then there was the purslane growing as a weed. So I'm guessing, I might be wrong, but the depth that the roots go to in each of those 2 plants, this must be fairly different. That's why they're not really competing with each other. Is that right? So are there any situations where 2 different crops can be grown, where you've got a deep-rooted crop and one that roots at shallower depths, so they can all be taking advantage of the soil moisture at different soil horizons? Has that been looked into?
I think that's a great question, and I think that's one of my curiosities as well, and that's why as it gets to be late summer, I'll kind of let the purslane and Veronica persica go, and while the melons and the tomatoes are, I'm harvesting more, like a lot of fruit, so they're clearly still producing. So I don't have a really an answer for you, other than that's a curiosity of mine, because I would love to see more living plants and in the farm field. But it is a real issue, though, to consider thinking about there's probably it's a dance, the competition with the soil moisture, and then finding the right plants, the right plant communities that are going to not outcompete your crop. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Teresa, you
Teresa.
had a hand up?
I just want to say thank you, Amy, for your presentation, but also for your incredible leadership, because through the years, it has been so cool to watch you form this idea and offer it up to the universe and have all of these folks get involved and provide input, and just you just created this amazing thing. It's so cool. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I learned a lot when I worked with Teresa when I first started with Extension, and just got my kind of feet wet, like with organizing events and things. So thank you for, it looks like Teresa, oh, there she is. Zero just moved on my screen. But anyway, I thank you for being there with me at the beginning.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Hi there. I do all of our community engagement and communications, and I'm curious what the biggest challenges you find are with communicating about this concept to people, you know, especially maybe farmers who have never encountered it. Like, what are their most common questions? What are the biggest pitfalls that they see? And what are some, I guess, kind of some key messages you've found that sort of help communicate your, you know, what you're all about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that yeah, there's not like kind of a recipe to follow. It's like you just do this and you plant this. So there's like not a recipe that everybody can follow and be successful. And so I think that there's an opportunity to like engage in the community of practice and have some mentorship, and you know, bounce ideas off of people who have been practicing for a while, and ideally some that are in your like neighborhood. I think there is a growing network kind of in this Willamette Valley, Western Oregon space. So there's the opportunity maybe even to connect to somebody locally, and that'd be something that you could reach out to the OSU dry farming program or shoot me an email. And there's likely somebody not too far from you that's been experimenting or exploring dry farming in some way. So those are the Dry Farming Accelerator program, I think, is a great kind of entryway, especially in the winter when there's some downtime, just to kind of explore and start to wrap your head around things. But I think especially with a lot of people who are finding out that they don't have water rights with the new enforcement staff at the Water Resources Department, I think, yeah, some of there's like the community of practice, kind of this kind of archive of presentations on the Dry Farming Collaborative YouTube channel, and the Accelerator program might be 3 places to kind of point folks at to start. And then there's all these the field tours that we're going to be hosting all throughout the end of the summer. There's going to be a lot of different people attending those. So if there's a field tour near one of the growers that is asking about this, I think doing what you could to encourage them to go to that field tour, because it won't just be, there'll be a lot of networking happening at those events as well. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Holly.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank Amy. Some of you might remember that Amy also just gave a presentation when I hosted the Willamette Valley SWCD meeting. So there were 8 other SWCDs there to get this information. And I think one of the best things we can do is just to help promote awareness about the Dry Farming Institute and the work that's happening, because a lot of people just don't even know about it. And so, you know, I also wondered, we have not at all talked about what we might want to do for an annual meeting next year. You know, we always have a keynote speaker, and you know, we can talk with staff, but that, you know, that's something, that's one way that we could certainly get the word out. The other was I wondered if you know, you mentioned the field tours, and I don't know how far afield they are, but it just made me think of the Edible Gardens tour that the Sustainability Coalition does, and whether you can somehow you know, they love promoting other people's tours as well. So maybe linking with them and helping them to get the word out. But yeah, thanks Amy for giving us permission to put it on our website, because we did have some requests for it, and I think that's another way that we can just help promote awareness of the great work that you and Nate and Eliza and others with the collaborative and the Institute are doing. So it's really exciting. I mean, I think the more people that learn about it, the more excited people will be to try it, even on a you know, on a smaller level. You know, people just with home gardens in their backyard would be interested too. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, my
Marcella,
pleasure. And
I'm sorry,
Oh.
go ahead. Please, please. No,
I
no,
just wanted to say, Holly, you often don't get to hear about how these efforts like lead to other connections, but Andy, who one of the directors at that meeting, I'm going to meet with them at their they have the Chegwin Farm incubator project, and I'm gonna share at their annual meeting. So I would have never, that may have never happened if you didn't invite me to speak to that group. So your connection, the connections are already, you know, it's like a ripple effect. So thank you.
Yeah, well, he contacted me. He contacted me right after your talk, and he said, "Gosh, Amy's contact information isn't in the handout materials." At which I mean, I thought that it was. So I said, she gave a whole bunch of handouts, and he said, "No, it's not in there." So I said, "Well, you can check the website." But anyway, I right away gave him her contact information because he was really excited. So that's great that that's happening. Cool.
Thank you.
Marcella.
I just had a quick question about I want to thank you for your presentation. I think it's really interesting. I don't think I have a suitable site because I'm on a hill with clay soil, but I appreciate your working with different cultivars that maybe people could grow that would use less water. But I had a question: do you start with seeds or transplants?
Yeah. Yeah, both. And it kind of depends on the crop and the site and the farmer. And but a lot of we'll always direct seed our beans and our squash. But I will also plant in the greenhouse the same day I direct some backups in case of some sort of, you know, casualty that might happen from who knows what. So you know, for example, for melons and tomatoes, I always do those in the greenhouse, but I know, and Nate, you might be one of the people who does some direct sown melons. Is that true?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So I think that it probably depends on who you're asking, but yeah, I think tomatoes, you know, even so for tomatoes, I always do those in the greenhouse, but I'm also have some volunteers that are coming up in the field, and I'm super inspired by these tomatoes that are volunteering from last year's that dropped on the ground. So, you know, I don't think I'm I'm kind of giving you, I guess, a spectrum of it's all over the place, I think.
Go ahead, Aubrey.
Hi, thanks. I was just wondering, kind of on the subject of, you know, encouraging buy-in from farmers. Have you had any experience in outreach to farmers who do have water rights, and has there been any interest from them? My admittedly incomplete understanding is that, like, if you don't use your water rights, you can lose them. So I'm wondering what interest there's been kind of in that regard.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Yeah, I think that there are some larger growers that are starting to be more interested, and one of the reasons is there's this marketing opportunity. Organically Grown Company and Market of Choice are both doing some campaigns or kind of targeted marketing around dry farm melons and starting to expand in some other crops. But a lot of the growers we've been working with You know, I haven't been going door to door and kind of trying to get people to convert to dry farming. There's a lot of people that have both. Like they have some irrigated acreage and some dry farm acreage. And there are even some in Benton County that have senior water rights and have chosen to do some dry farm crops because there's a niche marketing opportunity and their customers are excited about them. So I'm not quite sure. There's like, it seems like just as of this, maybe it started a little last year and this year, like there's these bigger kind of retail opportunities, but I think a lot of the growers we've been working with perceive themselves as too small. So I don't have I guess a great answer to that question, but I think that there's just a lot of activity around that scale piece right now and opportunities, and the smaller growers not being able to jump in here on these marketing opportunities that are popping up. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to chime in on a little bit of that, just to support what you said there, Amy. So like where we're at, we have a groundwater right. I've got a permit and we are perfecting the right. So we're in the process of going through the permitting process to formalize our water right. So we're permitted to use, but I don't have high producing wells. What I do have is a couple of wells that produce kind of middling amounts. So what I find is at certain times of the year, I don't need irrigation at all. At other times, you know, early parts of the summer, say, and then as I start getting the bulk of what I have out, then I start running into the constraints of I have water and I can apply it, and I've got an irrigation system that I can use, but I only have so much I can put out, and I have to cover all my fields in a rotation. So what I pretty rapidly get to a point where if I make too much go out, like potatoes, and grow as much as I want to on my land, I can't get back around my rotation fast enough. For the thing, like a week ago, I wanted to get this thing watered, and it's actually 10 or 13 days before I get through all my rotations. You know, if I'm not out there at 3 a.m. turning valves, and, you know, it starts to become like a limitation on the area you're using. But with dry farming, what I can do is focus my efforts and the water that I have on the crops that are the most water demanding. And then, like, we lease 2 plots. I have one that I don't have to think about. I have plenty of water. I've got one at Sunbow where I've got limited water. And then I've got all of these acres, like half-acre plots, quarter-acre lots, where I can kind of around the core of what I irrigate, I can dry farm, right? So now I'm extending, like, on some years, it's like by like 30%. I'm extending the land area that's actually in crop use. So if I was just strictly a water rights user, I would have a certain footprint that I could use and intensively farm. But because I'm like augmenting what I do with dry farming, I can put things into production, make some of this acreage that I'm already leasing pay for itself, instead of just having it sit there because I don't have the water for it, even though I've got a water right, because I don't have surface water, I've got groundwater. And other considerations that come into play are, I don't have to, you know, necessarily, I don't have to pay for the electricity to run that pump. I don't have to pay for the wear and tear on the equipment. I don't have to pay for the irrigation system to cover those extra feet. I don't have to pay for the labor to do as much weeding. I don't have to pay for as much in terms of overall maintenance. My use of that land can be productive with a lot lower inputs. And so then I can start having things that might go more than a year without really being cropped, right? Even though I could do them because I'm running cover crops and whatever, I can make kind of more maximum use of these small acreages, which a lot of people who are like providing for their local food system are working on small acreages. You know, if you're working big acreages, oftentimes you're going into the wholesale market, and that means you're going all over the state, all over the West, all over wherever, right? So I think this is also an important tool in the toolkit for folks who want to see a long-term more developed, smaller scale, regenerative agriculture provide food for localities that doesn't have to be, doesn't have to provide, giant acreages, huge amounts of water to put it into the shipping system, the distribution system, so that people in the Midwest can eat fruit from the West Coast. And, there's a lot of like long-term thinking that I think an idea like this has a lot of potential for, but it has to have legs. And in order for it to have legs, it has to have sustenance. And so to have some sustenance, I think it's going to need some support. So that's one of the reasons why I asked, Amy to come, is I think that we have a really rare opportunity for a local innovator and the innovations that come from these collaborations to get some support. So I'd like to see what we can do, water conservation being like one of our principal mandates. I'd like to see that we fund our mandates and see if we can get some resources in some future budgets, potentially to start working with the Dry Farming Institute as a partner so that we can help distribute this information to the people who are coming to us for information already and help support the efforts that will keep generating these ideas that are going to be more and more critical. Time goes on, it's only going to be more indispensable. So that's my 2 bits. I'm going to turn it over to Eliza.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I wanted to add too that it's a lot of the like small farmers, the tiny farmers, like, I'm even much smaller than Sunbow, and it's just 1 or 2 people, that want to grow on a fraction of an acreage, and that they can't because they don't have water rights now. And those beginning farmers, I know several of them in the last couple of years that started, but then are very scared now of the water right thing, and they kind of had to stop themselves, unfortunately. But when I started here at Lilliputopia, I immediately kind of found Amy, and I was really lucky because I don't have water rights here. This wasn't a farm before. So dry farming was a no-brainer thing for us to do. And it has just been so awesome to be able to do that and to show people that it's possible, because really you don't believe it until you see it. And as you can imagine now, after like 4 days of over 100 degrees, 2 months without any significant rain, I've been harvesting zucchini every day for the last several weeks. Our tomatoes are just covered in flowers and fruit. The squash look good. It's just incredible what you can do. And at the same time, I have a high tunnel that I have to water now every single day, sometimes twice a day. That's just super intensive. And there are different systems, but there's so much that you can do with the dry farming that this is something that we need to be going towards more in the future, and more people will be doing it, and new farmers need this as part of their tools.
Yeah, I agree with that. Aubrey, one thing that you asked about that it just occurred to me, I wanted to address as a question. If you do have water rights, if you don't use them, and your neighbor decides to drop a dime on you, then there's a process for that. But in most cases, it's totally unlikely that people wouldn't use their water rights, even if they're dry farming. They would likely supplement, they would likely do like I'm mentioning, because it's not like for instance, when I get my water rights, I'm going to have I already have totalizing meters on my wells. That will tell them how much I use a year. But it's not stipulated that I must use all of the water that's been designated that year in order for me to keep my right. I just have to make sure I do apply the water for a beneficial use. But it doesn't say, okay, Nate, you were granted 1 million gallons of water a year, and if you don't use your 1 million, we're taking it away from you. It's more like, you got your 1 million, and we've noticed for the last 6 years, no one has used any water on that right. And if you're not using it, we got other people who want it, right? So then you can go through a process. But this is all very rare. You never hear of anything like it, really. And so at least here in the valley, I haven't heard of it. Just to clarify that. So it's not like people would be in danger of losing a resource if they started using a more conservative set of practices.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Any more questions? There's lots of good information, and this is really, I hope, just kind of the beginning of a collaboration between this district and the Dry Farming Institute to see and explore what we can put together going forward. And so we'll be in further conversation with you, Amy. Thanks for the
That
great.
sounds lovely. And yeah, thank you so much again for having me. And, you know, I was just thinking about organizing just kind of a field tour with just our board. And I don't know if anybody has interest in just going around and seeing a couple of local plots. I don't know. I'd be open to, since it's all just down the street, to coordinating something like that. But anyway, thank you so much for all the great questions, and really grateful for your time.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to move on to